Welcome to this fourth installation of our running mechanics sessions. We're going to focus on several different characteristics of good running form today. Everyone when they're running goes through this mid-stance position. What separates people with good running mechanics and people with not so great mechanics is the amount of time it takes them to go from mid-stance on one leg to mid-stance on the next leg. What happens in between mid-stance on, let's say, this right leg and mid-stance on this left leg will separate good form from bad form. Why? Because in this mid-stance position, your center of mass can now rotate forward, and that's what allows you to go forward. When you allow gravity to pull you down at a greater rate than ground reaction force is pushing you up. So what can happen in between mid-stances? Well, you can push off with the rear, and you can also reach out and land out in front, creating a braking force. Let's take a look at this video here and get an idea of what's going on. So in this position now, the center of mass is ahead of the rear foot. But what we're going to see is the rear foot lifts off the ground, knee bending. Why didn't this runner push heavily from the rear? Well, the reason why is because if the runner is thinking about this rear foot pushing, they're not going to think about the front foot and it's going to land out front. The other thing is that once the foot has reached a certain position behind the center of mass, that's as much torque as the body can get off of that foot. And at that point, you're actually just creating torque in the ball of the foot. This runner is not creating a high level of torque in the ball of the foot, is lifting the foot off the ground really quickly, bending this knee. You see the angle behind the knee continue to change as this foot came up. What we're going to focus on here is that there are multiple ways that you can get this foot back underneath your hips. That is the goal. We want to get your foot back underneath your hips, and when it reaches this position underneath your center of mass, then we want it to return back to the ground as quickly as possible. That's our goal. You can use the hip flexor and swing this leg forward, leaving the angle behind this knee rather static, but at that point you're going to overload the hip flexor, and once you start swinging the leg, you've created a long lever that creates more work. You're also, that leg's going to continue to swing forward and you land out in front. Our bodies have very large glutes and very large hamstrings. Our body was designed to lift the foot up in a vertical motion, and that's what we're seeing here. We see the foot coming up, up, up. Now it's underneath the center of mass, and now we're going to see the next leg bend, and this foot's going to land underneath. We'll see the same thing here. Now this foot's underneath. Now we'll see the next leg bend and drive this foot down. So that's what we're aiming for here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at Genzeba Dibaba. She just set the world record in the 1500 meter last week, and while we can look at runners running around the track at full speed, it's not necessarily a great model for us to model our running off of unless we are also running at similar speeds because of frequency of motion. When this person's center of mass is moving forward at a greater speed, they're leaving the rear foot behind at a greater rate also. Now what separates great runners from slower runners is how quickly they can get the rear foot off the ground. We've looked before at how we'll actually move forward here, and I'll give a demonstration. She's in mid stance right now. This rear foot will come off the ground. There we go. It's off the ground now. It was off the ground in 2 frames. So she's going slow. It takes her 1, 2. Rear foot's off the ground. And right now she's probably running at 10-minute per mile pace, jogging around the track doing a victory lap. If I were to show you the video of her running at full speed, which actually I don't have great side footage of that, but we looked at other runners in our previous video. We looked at Haile Gebrselassie running at 49 second per 400 meter speed, and he's also getting his foot off the ground in roughly 2 frames from mid-stance. And we looked at Usain Bolt's video. In our first video, we saw the same thing, that at no matter what speed these runners are running at, they're getting their rear foot off the ground in less than 3 frames per second. Or I shouldn't say 3 frames per second, but in 3 frames in a 30 frame per second video. We've looked at amateur runners that sometimes take 6 frames to get their foot off the ground. That's the difference between an amazing runner and a runner that needs improvement. Why we're going to look at her in this video is because I think it's valuable to see that even at slower speeds, we're going to see the attributes of good running form that we want to focus on here. And what we're going to focus on is the knee bend when her foot comes off the ground. There, it's bending, it's bending, it's bending. Let's get her from this position, away from this pole. So here we are, mid stance, takes her 1, 2. In 2 frames, we already see a distinct bend behind the knee. We go to 3, very distinct bend. This femur, the thigh, is relatively perpendicular to the ground. We saw that in Usain Bolt and Haile Gebrselassie at full speed, whereas runners with less than ideal form will see the femur getting sucked way behind them at a high angle. We see it bending, the angle behind the knee I'm referring to, and it keeps bending, keeps bending. She is using the bending of the knee to get the foot back underneath her hips. The goal of bending is not just to bend the knee. We don't want to see her foot just coming up behind here. The goal is to use the bend to retract the foot back underneath the hips. We don't see a swinging motion here. We don't see the angle behind the knee remaining static and just a swing from the hip. We see the foot coming up, up, up. Now that this foot's underneath the hips, then we're going to see the bending of the opposite leg. Let's get a little better view here. So here she is landing. Now she is doing a victory lap, she's doing a little bit of a bounce, she's about to throw her hands up in the air, but even when she's jogging joyfully, we see great form. Again, that she's mid-stance, it takes her 1, 2, 3 to get a really good bend, foot off the ground, and we land here. It takes her 1, 2, 3, again off the ground, and a really great bend. So we see bend, bend, bend. Let's look at that again, bend, bend, bend. That's what we want to aim for here. Let's take a look at our first runner here. Here she is in mid-stance position. Let's count how many frames it takes to get the foot off the ground. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to really get it off the ground. And then we see the knee starting to bend, but not much. Bend, nope, actually at this point it stops bending for the most part, and we just see this foot getting swung forward. Not much of a bend here, not much of a bend here. It swings, it swings, it swings, it swings. All the focus is on this front foot. Toes up a little bit, and we're landing out in front here. Let's go ahead and compare it to Dibaba, and we'll see again Dibaba lands underneath, and she immediately starts bending the rear knee here. Again, lands underneath, rear knee starts bending right away, and it keeps bending. We see the next leg, it bends, bends, bends. If we go back over to this video, what we're seeing is push, 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 barely a bend, and swing, 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 swing. I think one of the biggest things we're also looking at here is that in Dibaba, we're seeing that this front leg is just falling down to the ground. Let's look at that again. She's focused on bending the rear knee a lot, and the front foot just falls down. That's the skill we really need to focus on. If we go back to our amateur runner over here, what we see is a lot of focus on the front foot, and the lower leg swings out in front of the knee. We see that again, lower leg swings out in front of the knee, when we could have been focusing more on the rear knee bend. And it's bending here for sure, and that's definitely helping, but if we look, when it's bending, it's way behind the body, yet when we go over here to Dibaba, we're seeing the foot coming up right underneath the hips. Watch again, the foot comes up right underneath the hips, and this leg just drops down. It's that dropping down motion that definitely is the signifying characteristic of a runner with amazing form. When we're watching marathon runners run at amazing speeds and they look relaxed, it's because that front leg is just falling down to the ground. They're not controlling it. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at 3 runners in a row here. So the first runner right here, let's go and take a look at their running. So here they are in mid stance. Takes them 1, 2, 3. Ooh, on the third frame, we see a huge push off the rear leg, driving forward to this femur. That's not what we want. We want to see this leg dropping down to the ground as this knee starts to bend. Next frame, we see a little bit of a bend. We're coming off there. That's better. That's a good bend. This leg is dropping down now. Toes are relaxed. Oh, you can see right here, the lower leg reaches out some, and we're pushing that leg out in front. Landing, we just locked the knee with this leg. That's not good. We don't want to land with a locked knee. Watch here, this foot comes off, and we can see that the right leg here, watch the lower leg, it's swinging, swinging, swinging. All the attention was on that leg. Okay, let's move over to our next runner, and we see really good knee bend here. Femur straight down. Let's go back again and watch that. It takes them 1, 2, 3. Foot off the ground, really solid knee bend coming down. Foot's nice and relaxed. That looks good. In this frame, I'm seeing a little bit of control of the foot right there. A little bit of control. That's going to add up. We want to see a little bit more relaxed landing. It's a little out in front. Again, this is being nitpicky, but at high speed, this will catch up to you. So let's watch again here. You see 1, 2, 3, foot's coming off the ground, good knee bend. This foot is coming down nicely. A little bit of control there. I would say this runner is actually forcing this foot down purposefully. That's good while we're trying to fix our form, but in the end we'd like this to come down a little more relaxed and not have this teeny bit of dorsal flexion toe lift coming down. Let's watch this next leg. Great bend in the rear. This foot's coming down. We're just seeing that tiny bit of control. That's being nitpicky, but this is one of our big stud fast runners here, and we want him when he's doing his 150-mile weeks at 5-minute pace. We want to make sure that he doesn't hurt himself. Let's go to our next runner here, another big stud runner. Look at his bike in the background. He's saying, yes, I am a bike, and not a cyclist. He's saying, yes, I am a cyclist. Not only that, I have 3 bikes in this picture. I'm a real stud. So he has mid-stance position here. He is doing a good job focusing on the rear knee bend, getting the foot off the ground in a timely manner, but what we saw was a lot of attention on this front leg, reaching out in front. It's going reach, reach, reach. A lot of toe point. His calves are probably going to get tight. He's doing a better job. He's not heel striking, but he's accomplishing that non-heel strike by swinging this lower leg forward and pointing his toes out in front. Pretty good job with the knee bend. Pretty good job with the knee bend in the rear. It's just that now he's going to drive forward with the hip flexor, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a bend, then drive forward and reach. So he's going drive forward and reach. Now we're starting to see a little bit of a swing action and all the attention on that front leg. Whereas we showed before, we want to see this leg just drop straight down while this foot comes straight up. That's what this runner needs to focus on, is a vertical motion, bringing the rear foot straight up and letting the front leg drop straight down. All right, let's do some fast reviews here. We have mid stance. We're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4. Good job. Really good rear knee bend here. Foot's coming down to the ground. That looks very good. Let's focus on this next leg. This looks really good. This runner's doing a really good job getting this leg right back down to the ground. See a little bit of forward leg swing there. Watch the next one. Good bend. This leg's coming down. That looks very good. All right, let's go ahead and watch this runner here. Good mid stance position. This takes 1, 2, 3, 4 to get the foot off the ground. Good knee bend. Good bend. We're seeing a lot of foot control up front though. A lot of foot control here. You can see that. A little bit of heel strike there. Okay, mid stance here. It takes us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames to get the foot off the ground. We had a good knee bend right off the bat, but there's so much focus on this front foot. We see the heel strike there. That's inhibiting the foot coming off the ground in a timely manner. Okay, let's go and take a look at this runner. Second time we've seen them. Takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get the foot off the ground. Good knee bend. The fact that it took us 5 frames to get the rear foot off the ground though means there's probably a lot of focus on this front leg. So I'm going to bet that this lower leg is about to swing forward. Sure enough, there we are. It's swinging forward. This isn't rocket science. The brain can only focus on one primary movement at a time. It's not a good multitasker. So if we're late with the rear foot, we're going to reach out some of the front foot. You can see that that foot's landing significantly out in front of the knee, up on the toes. That's going to cause really tight calves. Okay, this runner's in mid stance. They're moving a little bit quicker this time. So let's take 1, 2, 3. Foot's off the ground. That's great, but we're seeing a lot of lower leg swinging forward. So now we see a bend, but they've already set this front foot up for landing out in front. What we would like to see is this lower leg not swinging forward, rather more emphasis on this knee bending. Remember back to our first video of Dababa. With Dababa, we see the rear leg really bending, front leg dropping down. So let's go ahead and remember that here. Let's get another shot of that so you can see her rear leg really bending in the rear, front leg just dropping down. Rear leg really bending in the rear, front leg just dropping down. Okay, let's take a look at our runner here. It takes us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames to get the foot off the ground. We're really reaching out in front here. It's that reach we want to get rid of. Let's take a look at this runner here. We're in mid stance. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4 to get the foot off the ground, but we see the toes up in the air. We're heel striking out front. Foot's in front of the knee. Takes us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get the foot off the ground. We have a big heel strike, and we're heel striking into the ground. We want to get rid of that. We're in mid stance, takes us 1, 2, 3, 4 to get the foot off the ground. Now we have a good bend, and we're coming down nice and